very good afternoon and good evening to Ketki and my dear Soumya. It's really, really great honor to have you finally after stalking you for a few months for this interview, which is also part of my research work on women in architecture. And the research is mainly to look at women particularly. So the focus is on women as women and then in the profession of architecture. So it's a biographical conversation. So basically to understand your journey as a woman in architecture. So the focus is not mainly on what architecture you do, how you do and all, because that is another kind of research. So my focus is on women in this society and how do they deal with this kind of profession. Okay. So as I mentioned that this is a biographical conversation, the idea is to develop a manuscript out of it. And my wish is to document 100 women across India. I hope to reach that milestone someday. So I will continue working. And I carried out a pilot of it where I did a physical interview of people in Ahmedabad, and I published two papers, conference papers out of it. And now I'm going digital, which was already planned before COVID also, because I cannot go to every city. So I was already thinking of going digital, and COVID has anyway forcefully put me into that digital mode. So here, I will have a set of questions, which are very simple questions, right from your entry into architecture to some kind of wisdom for the future generation. And to start those questions, I thank you again. And also I seek your permission to get it recorded and to put it in the public domain. So welcome, Ketki, and please say a few words to start with, especially with your permission also.
Okay, thank you, Mansi, for having me here, and I do permit you to do the recording, and I'm really glad to be with my mentor, friend, to be able to share a few viewpoints about myself and how the entire journey of architecture or landscape architecture rather. So that's it.
Thank you so much. I would like to start with a very simple question about your childhood and how was it, in what kind of environment you were growing up that kind of intrigued you or kind of, brought you to the architecture education. So what led you to join Bachelors of Architecture? What was it? Was it somebody inspiring? You were seeing some people? Or like in my case, I was just knowing good drawings, to be honest.
Okay.
There was nothing more than that. So please share your childhood step towards architecture education.
My childhood did really inspire me to choose landscape architecture rather than architecture. Back then, one didn't know what architecture was or what landscape architecture was, what scale was. But I remember visiting my nanny's house every summer vacation, and there were these green fields. The road was full of flanked by these green fields, and it was a remote village near Akola in Maharashtra. And there was this big house which my grandfather had designed. He was a very smart man, not an architect though, but a very beautiful house with jacquard ceiling and thick walls. And it did have a veranda and a front garden and a huge backyard where all the cattle and all used to be there. And I remember going to the fields with my mama ji and all. So as I said, I didn't understand scale back then, but definitely these architectural fields, these agricultural fields, they did have an impact on me. And I had decided that whatever it would be to do with trees and plants back then. And there were a few visitors in the front yard, these birds which would come on the pomegranate tree. And I would always climb the trees with my cousins to pluck the pomegranate and things like that. But then, yes, it always was in the back of my mind. The nature and those agricultural fields, they were an inspiration for me. And when I was in class 8, I had decided I want to do architecture.
So I don't
come from the back.
to architecture?
No. I don't come from the family of architects. My father was a government leader, a practicing lawyer. Then he happened to be an information commissioner. My brother is a practicing lawyer, and there was no thing to do with architecture as such. But I used to like this one senior of mine in school, and she shared with me one day that she wants to be an architect. And that day I decided, I mean, it was as trivial or small as that, but that was the thing. And after
That's how
completing
we are
architecture,
in childhood.
it was very simple and straightforward and nothing very, glamorous about it or too much thought behind it. And then, of course, after architecture, it had to be landscape architecture. Then
Yeah,
I was
by
very
then you
clear.
get the clarity.
Yeah.
Good,
So
good.
that is
So
the part.
it's basically your farms and forests which drew you to architecture education. So
Yeah.
what I also wish to know, was there any kind of exploration further ki, being a girl child and of course I do know you for a long time now. But being a girl child going for this kind of education which is more man oriented, because you said also that your family did not have architects before, so I
Yeah.
assume that you did not have those apprehensions back in the family or any kind of resistance or things like that. It was just smoothly just getting in there.
My father did want me to do law because law
Okay.
college was just a road apart. It was hardly any distance. And he said,
Again, a
you just have
female
to
thing,
walk
huh?
the. I know.
Again, a girl
And
thing that she will be around.
yeah. And
Please. Hmm.
yeah, so my father thought that the law college was very near, and I just had to cross the road to go to law college. And then he was like, "You have the entire practice. I've been in the profession for so many years, and why do you want to do something really different like architecture, which would there would be a lot of struggle because we don't have people belonging to the same background." But then I was adamant, and I told him that no, if it has to be something, it has to be architecture and definitely not law. Then he agreed and let me do architecture. And then he was the one who willingly made me do masters, and he didn't have any objection in of me going to Delhi and all. Because back then also there was this image of Delhi that if a girl is going to Delhi, she'll live there. People used to be scared. Delhi का वो एक image था back then also. अब तो ज़्यादा हो
Still,
गया है.
still हो गया
Yeah.
है. Still it is there.
But then they were supportive. So that is
So
how.
yeah, nice, nice. So when you were doing architecture, and I recall that you went for your master's in continuation. So I will pose the
Yeah.
question for both of it together. Did you
Hmm.
really encounter situations or the realization amongst your peer group or in the class or within yourself
Hmm.
also in
Hmm.
during the education time about being woman is different in architecture, or was it just smoothly sailing and you were making those castles and dreams like all of us do in architecture education time? Because personally we were not really made those things realized when we were studying. It was, especially girls do
Yeah.
very good in studies, and I think you
Yeah.
were in also girls college, so probably it was
Yeah.
altogether different situation.
Yeah. It
Please.
was. It was.
So how were you really
Yeah.
preparing yourself for post architecture profession, and also countering this fact that there will be men in the profession also? Uh,
Again, I just went with the flow, to be very frank. But one thing I knew for sure, that first interview of mine with Professor Shahir, and I knew what I had invited. Because I really didn't know about who Professor Shahir was. And once I gave the interview and I was out, and there were these group of people who had also appeared. They appeared for the interview. There were a few boys, a few girls, and all of them were older to me. They had practiced for a year or two or more than that with landscape architects, and I was the only one who was a fresher. तो कहीं पे एक दिमाग में हो गया था कि शायद नहीं, I won't get through. Even though the interview went well, Professor Shahir liked whatever I showed with some tricky questions that he asked me. But then somewhere I felt ki nahi, these are so experienced people, 3 years they've been with landscape architects. and I am like a fresher. So I was feeling that I was very young because there were this group of people who were also aspirants for the same master's degree course. There were, I think, half boys and half girls. It was an equal percentage. And I wasn't very comfortable mingling with them because I always thought I was too young. And these people, some of them were from Academy of Architecture Mumbai, some from SPA Delhi, and then there was this me, a shy girl from a girls' college, LAD. Most of them didn't even know about LAD then. But then finally, I happened to be a part of this group of aspirants, and we went on to do the master's course. And yes, it was difficult. One, the climate of Delhi was very hostile. In the winters, it became too cold. And in fact, Professor Shahir had asked us, with the kids who belong to Maharashtra, that will you be able to survive in the winters in Delhi and also study hard for the master's course? And we were like, okay, now we are here and we've gotten a chance, so we will cope with it. But it was very difficult. Again, the boys doing so good with the drawings. There was this kind of a mature perspective they had towards landscape. And I was just, I didn't actually, it took me a 1.5 semester to realize what landscape architecture really is. But then I happened to cope and impress Shahir sir at times, is what I feel. This is one-sided though. But then that is how it was.
Yeah, but that's why we get into education, no, to learn and understand things and all. And it's good that
Yeah.
you are stressing on your master's education, because I remember I visited your college as a guest speaker when probably you were an undergraduate student,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Doing my
And
internship
I
at
know
Nokia
you since
Associates.
then because you also did your training when I was working as an urban designer with
Yeah,
Pankaj Modi sir
yeah,
and Pranati Modi's ma'am's
yeah,
office. So it's been
yeah,
long time we know each other. However,
yeah.
this conversation is more about you, so I have to now bring you back when you were really graduating from your masters, because after that you straight away jumped into doing your practice and other kind of explorations, and you started your family life. What was it going on in your head about how to go ahead? Because again, you as you mentioned, you didn't have a background where there was office ready. Had you done law, you would have just started from next day. So
Yeah,
how was
yeah.
it?
I
How
would
was
have
it?
been 6 years ahead. I would have been 6 years ahead in law. And here I was, a fresh landscape architect. And then I got immediately married after doing my master's. But the support system was really good. My in laws were very encouraging, and so was my husband. But then again, I had my first boy child early. I took a little break. But then I thought, ki, why not start teaching then? I was able to spare a bit of a time. So I started teaching at the same college, my alma mater, SMMCA. And then I felt that no, I was not for teaching and I always wanted to practice. So I joined this one modest office here in Nagpur. And I was happy because we were just three architects there. It wasn't a big office. And sir would travel to Dubai often. So we were like the whole and soul of the entire office, designing, checking structural drawings, going to site, sometimes dealing with the client even. He, sir would give us so much free hand. And it was a very good learning experience for me then to explore the hardcore architectural practice. I continued with it for 1.5 years. It was very tough because my boy, the
Baby.
older one, he was quite young then. But then I somehow shuttled between work and home, and I managed. And as I said, I had a support system, so I went with the flow. But then once there was this competition which came up. It was a landscape architecture competition for a big campus. And then Sir felt, the lead architect, that I, being a landscape architect, he said, let's uh, take participate in the competition, and why don't you only lead the project? And so I, with a few juniors in office, We worked for the competition day and night. And then there was this jury which happened one day. And it fortunately so happened that it really went well. And we got the commission, the landscape project. But then the way it is, because then sir thought that I am not a landscape architect and he is. And then we got the commission also. So then how would things be now? So then he asked me whether I want to continue or not. And I was in a double mind whether to continue being with sir, or now I started feeling a little confident with that one win. It was quite a big site that we had handled. And then one day happened that the client called me and he offered me another project. And he's like, if you want to be on your own, if you want to handle your own project, why don't you start working on this project? And then I thought, why not? So I openly spoke with my boss and told him, sir, I have an opportunity and I don't think I will be able to continue with you. He was a little sad because by then I had started managing everything. I mean, I was like the karta dharta of the office then. I myself and one more architect, a lady, a woman again. But then I told him that, sir, I've decided I want to step out and be on my own. So that was the first project that I did. And I remember it was around 4 acres of land that I handled.
Wow. So
And
life
so then
changing.
it was, yeah. And so there was no looking back. And I was so happy that it wasn't because of somebody recommending me being someone's wife, or me being someone's, daughter-in-law, that I got the project. But because I being Ketki Tirke, I was offered that project. And because the client had seen me, the way I dealt with the competition which was floated, and the way I explained the proposal, whatever it was. So then there was no looking back from then. That was the first project it all started with.
So basically, because you were exploring your endeavors, professional endeavors individually, it also matters. Because I'm also trying to figure out, when people have partnered with a same profession spouse, how does it work and how it does not work in many cases. And in your case, because your spouse is not from architecture, you had to really swim it out by yourself,
Yeah.
not really expecting professional kind of support, but of course you had very good support, as you mentioned. So now when you were on the roller skating of professional practice, how were you managing life and work both? Because then it is all the more difficult with your little baby growing, and projects
Yeah.
demand much more attention. Were
It
you
was very
practicing from
difficult.
home or office separate, or what was the entire dynamics?
In the beginning, I did share my office with my husband. The same place. I had a cabin of my own, and I operated from there. It was never from home from the start only, because I knew that if I had to be a disciplined professional, then I didn't want to give excuses of being a woman or having a kid to look
Baby.
after, or a family. Because then one knows, if you are a working woman, then somewhere you have to compromise. No one can be perfect. And then if your better half understands that he will have to compromise at times, and then he is, like I said, I had a good support system, so I sailed through. But it was actually difficult. And
I
with
can
landscape
imagine.
architects, be it a man, a woman, sometimes architects can be very interfering. They don't give you a free hand. दे से कि मैडम ये अभी हमने डिसाइड कर लिया है, ये अभी आपके पास जगह है, अभी आप इसको सुंदर कर दो, या अभी आप इसको मतलब फेस लिफ्ट कर दो. So be
So
it a
it's
man
also
or a
between
woman, as
architecture and landscape architecture, huh?
it
Because
is,
you take
it is.
landscape as a primary activity.
Yeah. So sometimes they are very generous, but in the beginning they weren't. It was just a matter of beautification that I did for a few projects. But then eventually it so happened that they took me from right from the inception of the project. And then I had a free hand too. So that is how it was. But it certainly was not difficult. I mean, it was very difficult, not easy to manage family and work as well.
Because because we have to do both, and we have to do justice to both. That is One is for our own self, like, and one is of course for the family, you know. And especially family activities cannot be compromised at all, even if you have to do something out there. So when you were actually now gliding, I will say, or flying into the profession, were you looking up to some ideals or some kind of projects or some building your own ideology, or it was just flowing because landscape is a very noble cause anyways. So tell us something about your influences, who influenced you, or what kind of work or what kind of philosophy was influencing, because you did tell about the childhood, this farm and forest were there, but now when you have some better sense of architecture, you were growing. Were there people who were influencing your kind of work which you do, because you still practice full-fledged, and now you are teaching as well, because then you are also reflecting through teaching. So some influencing people or works.
The first inspiration always was Professor Shahir, because I had no clue of what this man, the kind of impact that he would have on us, this bunch of kids, because we were the last batch. After that, sir retired. But then the first window, he opened it for us to look at landscape architecture the way we did, or still we do. So first was always Professor Shahir. And then, as I said, I came into practice. Initially, it wasn't an ideology or a particular landscape architect or someone to look up to. But then I always kept myself updated with what good was happening in the profession, some inspirational. Okay. So the first point of inspiration, as I said, was always Professor Shahir. And as both of us know, that there were these two schools of thoughts. One, the SPA school of thought, and one, the CEPT school of thought. So initially, we used to always feel कि CEPT में कितना research होता है और क्यों होता है. But then eventually, over the years, when one started realizing about or listening or reading about climate change and knowing more about ecological perspective, and these practices that landscape architecture did in terms of the ecological approach, and they were really sensitive to the context and all. And then one realized that no, one has to stop, reflect for a while. And then I started looking at works of Aniket Bhagwat and other people from the CEPT school of thought, and it really inspired me. And now I'm doing a couple of projects in which we are thinking of creating an ecological corridor and things like that. So I'm still learning and trying to adopt those in my projects. And
Completely
I also trouble you in between when I have to do something with the lakes.
We do talk about it every now and then, and it's always the water has connected both of us. So when you talk about your complete immerse in landscape architecture, I assume you are also doing architecture as well inside the landscape architecture, because architecture gets embedded here. I would like to know what kind of psychological and physical aspects you encounter both on the field, and when you are really interacting with people around, being a woman, or have you overcome that, or probably you live in a place which is much more advanced in this sense, where there is more acceptance, or what kind of situations you face being a woman?
Mostly whatever projects I've done till now, I've always done with male architects. They've been the lead architects for these projects, and they've taken me in as a landscape architect.
Okay, so they are
initially
your clients,
it used to
main clients.
Yeah, basically yes, that is how it is with me. But then now recently clients also directly approach, be it developers or others, private clients. But initially it used to be with these architects belonging to the old school. And then there was this hitch from my side also. And then I used to feel that will I be rude, or will I sound arrogant if I stress on my point of view? But then the projects that I'm doing lately, since say 3-4 years or say 5 years, They are, as I said, architects are not that bad people now that I've realized. They are generous, and then they do. They are flexible at times also. So there are little changes that we make them do in certain projects, be it a residential project or a resort, and they agree on. If you have a logic behind it, so they agree that okay, madam, let's do this change, or let's sit together and discuss on it. So that is how it is.
And
There was
on the
this
field,
hitch
and on the
initially.
field, on the field.
On the field, see, from the beginning, I have the first project that I got was not in Nagpur. It was near Nagpur, like a suburb. And then I got used to working with these laborers and workers in and around Nagpur. I did an industrial project also. I did really face a lot of problem when I did that industrial project, because the CEO was so adamant on having these particular flowering plants, and every time he would want to dictate. And I remember formally writing a letter to the head person, and not complaining, but just telling him my grievance, that if everything is monitored by sir, then what is my role as a landscape architect? And then I remember that this person agreed, and then finally the planting plan or the drawing that we issued, so everything came about with respect to what we issued, and not
So
with
it's
what the CEO was wanting.
so
But
basically you
it
have
was
to make a
difficult.
noise. You have to put your
Yeah,
point. You have to put your
yeah,
point, and then people do
yeah,
understand. If they listen, they will
yeah,
understand, I
yeah.
think.
But then
And that's also
later they
applies
did
with,
praise,
yeah.
and they were happy about the fact the way the landscape came up in a 2 3 years, the way it matured. But then initially it was a fight with this person always wanting to dictate. Yeah,
Because you have a special niche within architecture, I will say it's an independent practice. I mean,
yeah,
you have the choice to practice both architecture and landscape, but you also have the choice to just practice architecture. So you
yeah,
get to work with both kinds of clients, architects as well as client themselves, you know. So
yeah, yeah.
non-architects, so who are the developers, or who are basically going to work. So, have you really experienced some kind of advantageous position being a woman? Maybe
Not
some
really,
incident
but
or something. Or probably what you were just saying now is also an advantageous position because you made a letter and that was heard of. Okay. Uh, your record. So when you talk about this kind of experience of being woman, both as challenging as and an opportunity, like you mentioned in your case, uh, do you think this is a hypothetical situation? And I want you to imagine, do you think cities, neighborhoods, buildings would have been different if the situation was just reversed in case of gender and architecture? So imagine a situation where more leading architects are women, architects, landscape architects. I want you to give me a picture how cities, buildings, neighborhoods would have been. What would be the change? First of all, do you agree that the cities would have looked different? And if different, what would be the change which you think would have been, which is not there?
okay.
Because it's a
Uh,
patriarchal fashion.
yeah, yeah. It definitely, the image of the city would have been different. If I look back at Nagpur only in these current years, with lot of development happening in terms of the infrastructure, the roads, especially the cement roads coming up. So Nagpur used to be that quaint
Okay.
so
So
definite
if you look at the
yeah.
last few years, Nagpur, you were saying.
Yeah. Definitely, if women would govern things, the scene would definitely be different. The image of the city would definitely be different. As I quoted Nagpur, it used to be this quaint city a few years back, and we really enjoyed the slow-paced city and nature around. It has these biodiversity corridors and these beautiful lakes as part of the city. And as all of us know, it is part of the Deccan Plateau, again, to go back from a landscape architect perspective. But then with these cement roads coming up, and there are these few agitations which happened lately. There is this one forest, urban forest, which where trees are being cut for some model hub. And mostly when I see these activists, they are women who are coming out now and trying to protect this piece of land rich in biodiversity, and telling the citizens that it is time now to step out of their houses, come out on the roads, and make their voice heard, and tell people that now development is no more needed, but like what you always preach or say, the de-development is what we need now, you know.
And that
So
responsibilities
what,
of the woman, I guess.
yeah, so definitely the image of the city would have been different. Again, as you quote, more empathy women have. So the outlook is really different when it comes to a woman
Cities will be
being.
greener. But if you
They
look at the
definitely.
chronology of women architecture, but
Hmm.
earlier women were not even, much in architecture, but like in Nagpur case, it was still greener. Probably there was
Yeah.
not many designers or architects itself. That may be a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Could be. Could be.
Okay, now we come towards the last question of this conversation, and I'm really
Hmm.
thankful that we have been trying to organize these technical glitches and still
Yeah.
manage
Yeah.
to have this conversation. And I'm really
Hmm.
sorry for all those glitches. I wish you to really say some message to the younger generation without any bias for genders, because it's not about men, women. We have more genders
Yeah.
to be more inclusive.
Yeah.
What kind of message you would like to convey to the younger generation about the profession, and also being more inclusive and empowering for women, because the research is on women. So the
Okay.
message, if it can be for women, for all people, all younger generation in the profession.
Yeah. Mm, a message that I would like to give is very simple, that it is not very easy for women to be able to run the profession of architecture and be updated. And so you just have to go with the flow, as I did also. And I will ask them to be a little patient, to be more empathetic in the design. The current times need it. And a little what do you call, patient, of course they have to be, but then everyone knows that an architect flowers in her or his 40s. So definitely it is not like an engineering course that you get the degree and then you get a good package and you are placed somewhere. So you need to realize that architecture takes time, and a woman in architecture, it becomes all the more difficult. So patience
Longer,
is the key
longer time.
word. Yeah, it does take longer, and if you don't have a background, you don't have someone from the same profession, it takes all the more time. But then if you go with the flow, if you're there, if you are disciplined and you are honest with your profession, then you can always make a mark, you can always carve your niche. But then the challenges are more for the current generations. Unlike when we started, there is climate change, and then there are other issues. There's so much competition, so many architecture colleges coming up. So definitely they'll have to create a language, a vocabulary of their own in terms of design, be more empathetic to design. So that is what I feel. Simple as
And
that.
I guess
Nothing.
you are also teaching those things, where because now your teaching is a secondary activity and practice is your
Yeah,
primary activity.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I am actually trying to explore why we only call architects who are practicing as architects and not teachers who are teaching, you know. So teachers are called teachers, but not architects. And that's my experience. And that was the beginning of my research, by the way. So if one is
okay.
teaching, is also an architect. It's just that this the way we see it. So you really
Yeah,
bring out a very good balance of being a practitioner and teacher, and that's really commendable for a person who started solo as to practice and then set your foot, and also have such wonderful variety of projects and do successfully, and also make a name for yourself and teach at the same school. It must be really I mean, amazing for you to experience that you are associated there.
yeah,
and students
It
look
is
up to
always
you.
nostalgic. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and because it's a girls' college, the girls look up to you, and you will give them hope that it is
Yeah.
possible to build a career, and it
Yeah.
is very important for women, I guess. Yeah.
Most
Okay.
of them end up being in my office, my
Okay.
students.
For training
So
and all.
again, it is continuation of the teaching that happens in the studio, but I really enjoy it.
I can imagine that. Because we are talking more outside this conversation, we are always soaked in our chota chota conversation every now and then, because
Yeah,
we are also
yeah,
calling each other without any prior appointments all the time. So we
yeah,
have that
yeah.
advantage between each other. So I would like to
Yeah.
bring a closure to this conversation with really thanking you. And Ketki, it's really wonderful to have this conversation with you. And we hope that you do much more and give more hope to all the younger generation, irrespective of gender, all of them, that it is difficult, it is longer, but it is possible to do what you love to do and follow your childhood dreams. Probably that's my learning from your conversation. Thank you so much for being here and for your time. And I'm sorry for these technical glitches.
No, no. Some of them were from my side also. I'm sorry for that. And in my inspiration, I forgot to mention you, but you definitely are on the list.
No, it's
When I
not
saw
required. It's
young
not
Mansi
required.
popping in Pankaj Modi's office, and I still always recall that image of yours, and you also have always been an inspiration.
And that scooter in which we used to
Yeah,
travel.
I know.
Chalo. Okay, that's a good moment
Yeah,
to really end the conversation. And also, Zoom is coming to an end. Thank you very much.
yeah.
I connect you outside
Thank
the
you.
recording. Hello.
All right. Thank you.
Chalo.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Soumya.
Yeah.
And Ketki, take care.